Market Day continues. Let's change the pace a bit. One-on-one conversation coming. We have Tyler Hobbs, a wonderful generative artist, and Benny Redbeard, an art patron and rare Pokemon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for having us here today. There's a lot of people we have to thank, but we're not going to thank everybody. We're just going to thank the venue and the amazing people at Digital Art Mile who put this together. I am here with a good friend, Tyler. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great today.
Yeah?
Yes.
How was it getting up this morning?
A little bit behind. I'm lucky to bring my little baby today. She's 7 months old. She's back there. You can see her.
She's back there. She's rooting you on.
Yeah, she's cheering. So a little bit. I was running a little bit late, but otherwise I'm feeling great today.
So there's rumors going around that you might have either left the planet, you might not be making art anymore, you turned into an AI, but the truth is you are making the best generative project in the world, which is a child.
Yes.
And how has that changed you now? Because we've spoken about this, how basically you're doing more work, you're focused on your kid, life has kind of changed, but you're still there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I might be making more artwork right now than I ever have. But yeah, with the baby, it definitely changes I think it changes your priorities, and it changes your perspective, and it changes your values. And so I had kind of been heading in the direction of caring a lot less about things like social media and, talking on podcasts and all that kind of thing. But yeah, with the baby, your quality hours to work are so few that to spend that on Twitter is just it's just not where you want your time to be. So I try to spend my time either with my family or trying to make artwork, and I try to eliminate basically everything else besides that.
But sometimes when you're not on Twitter, it doesn't mean that you're not present making work. And I think it's an important message for artists, right? To understand that, you don't always have to be present to be there.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's kind of weird because I think this is something a little bit unique to the current crop of digital artists where they have been very present on Twitter, on Instagram. They've been very reachable by the audience. That's not something historically that artists have been faced with. A lot of artists have this stereotype of being, hermits or introverts, where they go move to the middle of the desert and don't talk to anybody for 20 years. And I think a lot of artists today maybe still kind of have that personality, but for the expectations have changed a little bit in terms of what a digital artist is required to do. But I feel like to a certain extent I've paid my dues on Twitter, and I kind of want to focus a little bit more on making artwork. I still like to do high quality interaction. Right, so this is a great example right now. A nice conversation in person. I really value that kind of connection with people, but I value a little bit less just kind of constantly broadcasting your thoughts out to so many people in such a kind of a thoughtless way, and also just having a fire hose of thoughts blasted at you every day. I don't think that, for me, that's not a healthy or productive way to engage with people.
No, definitely. I mean, for me, when I put my Twitters out, I no clue what I'm talking about. I just throw it out there. So, your interactions with humans, though, I saw yesterday when you were showing your artwork, there's still this very much the difference between, I would say, maybe other art communities and ours, is this relationship between the artist and the collector. And it seems like when people come and they see your work in person and they have that conversation with you and they buy it, especially that physical piece, there's something there that's different. And that's sort of something I know that you've built on your relationship through all the work that you've put out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to my roots a little bit. I was talking with my wife about this, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I mean, this is how I was selling my work, was in person, people visiting my booth more or less in Austin, and telling them about generative art, about how you can make art with algorithms, and getting to see their excitement firsthand and really making that personal connection with the collector. And you get to hear what the work means to them. You get to see what interests them, what they talk about, like what they're drawn to out of the body of work, which is different for everybody that sees it. And that's just such a better way to experience your own work and to share that experience with somebody else than like, gosh, posting it on Twitter and seeing like what number comes out on the likes. It's a completely different category of relationship to the work, and it's, as an artist, it's so much more fulfilling and meaningful, and that's what you kind of want to get out of your job as an artist. So that's why I prioritize this, and I don't worry so much about myself being on on social media.
This new project, which is called, do you want to tell people a little bit
Called
about it?
Day Gardens.
Day Gardens. And you have physical pieces and you have digital pieces.
Yes.
Which, by the way, is sold out. So if you try to get one, you can't anymore. You can buy it on secondary on any platform.
Sure.
But this is a project about a garden in your house, right?
A little bit, yeah.
So, and can you tell us a little bit about that connection between telling us, sort of using an algorithm in your everyday life
Yes.
that you've created and now you want to share to other people?
Absolutely, yeah. So the title Day Gardens kind of alludes to this connection that I've felt for a long time between a connection to gardening and artwork. So I'm actually kind of an avid gardener. This is something that I've learned from my mom. And gardening is this, in some ways, it's kind of a generative art form because you sort of you put some work in, you try to create a little bit of structure, you have a bit of an intention for how you want things to turn out, but they always turn out differently. The way that the plants grow, some thrive, some don't. And so it's always a bit different from what you expected. And so in a lot of ways, generative art is similar. It's this like only loosely controlled creature. Another big connection specifically for this work is, for me, really about time and speed. So, the speed that gardens grow at, that they develop at, it's like you're thinking about months and seasons and years, and it's not something that happens overnight. And this work also is not something that happened overnight. For me, it developed slowly over the course of a couple of years. There was an initial exploration that I made, and then it kind of lay dormant for a season before I came back and saw that work again and really felt strongly connected to it, which is not the case for every work. As an artist, you're constantly kind of sketching and trying new ideas, and sometimes you come back 6 months later and it doesn't resonate for you anymore, and sometimes you come back and it looks even better than it did when you were working on it. And
So it sounds like a career more than a garden, you're saying.
yeah, I guess. It's,
You went through tens of thousands of outputs
Yes.
to choose 50, correct?
yes, for this series. So there are 50 works in the series. I generated about 40,000 unique images with the algorithm, and then curated it down to the final set of 50. So it was a really involved, elaborate curation process, and that also took a really long time. So yeah, it was. I haven't done a project that way myself before, but I did that for this, and it was a really unique experience. I think the work turned out a very particular way because of that.
Generative art needs sometimes to take time. Sometimes it's about, creating the algorithm doesn't quite fit. How many times have you created outputs or algorithms that you looked at, stared at, and then were like, no?
No. The majority of them, yeah. I think that if I had to guess, I'd say something like, out of every time I try to like make work, that maybe a quarter of it is like good, and maybe a tenth of it is like great. In my opinion, it's hard to like measure that kind of thing exactly, but this is kind of like, you get used to that experience as an artist. Every time you make a work, it's a little bit like rolling the dice. Like even when you hone all of your skills, you feel like you're an experienced artist. You just can't produce like a hit, on demand. It doesn't work like that. You just try whatever feels interesting to you that day, and sometimes it turns out to be special, and most of the time it doesn't. So you just keep making work.
And obviously, the algorithms and outputs that your wife likes, you always choose, correct?
Actually,
She's in the crowd. I'm just reminding you, so you should just say yes.
Yeah, actually, I kind of annoy her by making her like the last person to see the work. I have this thing like I don't want to show anybody the work in progress. It's actually really painful for me for anybody to see a work that's not in like the final form. Like I want everything to be right, because then, you know, if she saw it, she'd be like, oh, okay, you know, it's nice or whatever. I'd be like, but wait, you know, like the textures aren't there. Like as soon as this other thing happens. So I often make her wait until the very end, and that was the case with this work as well.
Okay, she made you wait to the end to see the baby, so it's the same idea.
Yes.
So these physicals that you made, I just want to be sure you chopped down the trees, right?
Yes.
And then you made the wood frames yourself. Is that correct?
Almost.
So, yeah, how'd this work exactly?
Yeah, exactly. So these, I did something for the first time here, which was printing onto wood panels. So historically, you know, I'm doing drawing or painting or printing on paper typically, but I was really interested in a little bit of a different physical format here. So I did some experimentation with printing on wood panels. And hand stained the edges of the panel myself. You can only barely see it, I think, on this photo, but I think the previous photo showed it a bit. And these prints, it's a little bit hard to tell from the photo, but there actually is a sort of three-dimensional quality to these as well, a little bit of kind of a relief sculpture. We did a special printing process. It's almost a bit like 3D printing, where you put a color down as the final layer. So it's able to build up texture and depth, and some areas show through the wood panel that the print is on. So the work is very much like intermingled with the wood and the wood panel, which I felt was really fitting. You know, the wood has this kind of natural and flawed quality to it. It's kind of rich with detail in the same way that I like for my work to be, even though it's digital, and we often see digital as this very like clean and sharp stuff, kind of like a Jeff Davis image maybe. I like having like
You just had an amazing show, by the way.
absolutely in Paris. Yeah, congrats, Jeff. For my own personal taste, I love to get like all those like little details in there and a lot of little variations. So when you look close, there's a lot of things for you to enjoy at the small scale as well. So the wood, I thought it was nice that it kind of echoed this quality of the work.
So you're a generative artist or an artist.
Sure.
But before that, you actually, one of my favorite things that I own, it's mine. Can we just go to that next slide or there? So you drew this when we went out to dinner once.
Yes.
And you are an incredible artist in general. Are we going to get to a point when people realize that digital art are just the same thing? Generative artists, we're just going to call them art. Like what point are we going to get to when we realize that the skills that other artists have is just all the same thing?
Right. That's a good question. I think we're really slowly getting there over time. You know, computers have had this sort of stigma since 60s, 70s, and yeah, in some ways it takes a little bit of a different skill set. Like often, especially for my work, you're talking about programming being involved, and that's not a skill that every artist has. But mostly the hard part actually is not the programming. It's actually the sort of visual aspect of the work, about managing composition and texture and color. And so the most important sort of skills and training for a generative artist is not being able to code well. It's being able to being able to craft images, I think, or craft concepts perhaps. And so I think that I think we're slowly getting there. I think that the tools become more accessible, so more people start to kind of integrate things like programming into their work. I think some people start to realize that generativity is not like a binary yes or no, the artist is generative or not. It's more of a spectrum, and different artists have a different sort of level of generativity in their work. There are many physical artists, painters, or sort of conceptual artists, like Olafur Eliasson, who actually have a lot of generative quality to some of their works, but we never think about them that way. So I think over time I expect that viewpoint to shift as people start to see generativity as sort of one potential dimension of a work. How much the artist is working through systems and processes, how much they're kind of letting go of complete control over the final outcome of the work. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
You like to work with your hands, right?
Yes, I do.
And obviously draw, which this is. I look really good here. I'm not
You
gonna
look
lie.
great.
Put some hair on the
Yeah.
side of my head, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Artists like yourself, MP Kaz, some others feel that like they could take generative art and create physical pieces with it. And I think that sometimes we have this stigma that we say digital art, and people are like, well, that there's no physicality to it. But that's something important to you, and I know like in your future projects that you're working on that we can't talk about because they're top secret.
Right.
You told me you would kill me, but I know that that's something that you feel that we could show sort of generative sort of code and whatnot, and really have a way of people feeling and touching it and seeing it in different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no reason at all that this kind of art has to be restricted to the computer screen. I think you can have work that is fundamentally digital at heart, or is generative art at heart, or basically is computer art in some way, but it doesn't have to remain inside of a digital screen. So I've created a lot of work through plotter drawings and plotter paintings. These are a very direct way that you can take a digital idea and move it into the physical realm. Obviously, these works here, a lot of thought went into the physical presentation of the work. I think the reason for this, there's a couple of reasons. One is, I always want the collector to have the best way to experience the work and to have a really nice way to live with the work, ideally, if they choose to. And so that's going to require some kind of presentation. And so does that mean that they have to put a screen on their wall and show this digital image 24 hours a day? Like, that's not always a solution that people are interested in. So I think thinking about the physical format is important in just the same way that, I don't know if you see video art from the 80s or 90s in a museum, right? Those artists like thought a lot about, here's the model of TV that I want you to stack 9 of them and make a square, and it's going to show exactly this way, It's kind of a digital type of work, but they're thinking about the presentation format. And I think that it's a good idea for digital artists to put the same level of care into the presentation. The second kind of aspect to it, I think, is we have some limitations with digital screens right now, right? Like, they tend to only come in 2 shapes, like 16:9, weird rectangle, and 1x1 square.
Square.
And like, those are both kind of annoying formats to have to work in as a visual artist. So I'd love to have a 4:5 aspect ratio screen. I'd love, for example, to have like a full color e-ink screen that you can put on your wall. Like, that would be amazing. As soon as we have that, 10, 20 years from now, I think a lot of digital artists will, including myself, will be much more excited about showing the work that way.
Yeah.
So part of it's a temporary limitation, I think, on our current screen
On
technology.
the technology. We could go back, 'cause we don't have to see me anymore. So these physicals, ask you a tough question here.
Yeah.
People who bought the physicals, they're not probably flipping them right away. In your mind, if you could, would you do only physicals for this drop? Or are you happy to do half physicals, half digital? Because the digital ones that were bought, let's be honest, they were already listed right away, right? Versus these, seems like someone buys them and it's mine.
Yeah.
I want to hold it.
Sure.
There's a big difference there. And in our market, I think that
Yeah.
there's something to say about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting question. I hadn't thought about that one so much. Mostly, I thought about these works in terms of, really, for me, they're digital works first. And honestly, I love the way that the works look and feel in the digital format. Like, the textures and colors are just right in that format. But being here in Basel and having the opportunity for people to actually see and experience a work in person, I spent a lot of time thinking about a way to physically show a lot of the work as well. So we chose to print half of the works onto the wood panels. So mostly I was thinking about it from that kind of perspective. In terms of market dynamics and people buying or selling, it's kind of it's a bit weird. I really value my work getting into the hands of people who really care about it, people who are buying it for the right reasons. Let's just say, what are the right reasons? I don't know, because they love the artwork. They want to support this kind of work. They think this kind of work is important. And so ideally, most of the work ends up in the hands of people like that. But I also believe, I don't believe too much in kind of gatekeeping access to the work. Like I also really value the work being open and fairly available. Like we really try not to do, special wait lists. And so the vast majority of the work was openly available for anybody to purchase. And so there's this kind of consequence of that some of the people who will purchase are there for more market motivated reasons. This is true for traditional artwork as well. I mean, the folks buying stuff auctions at Christie's are not always doing that just because they think it's the best painting they've ever seen, right?
But we're here for the art.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
Snowfro talks a lot about, which he really talks a lot about, like generative art, and the idea of generative art is actually becoming an individual. I found that interesting because you might have 10,000 outputs, but the one that means something to you is yours, right? With your past projects, I think people could look at Fidenzas and say, that's my forever Fidenza, same way they say that's my forever Squiggle or my forever Punk. There's something about the idea of generative art that you find individualism. And like with the amount of AI and technology we're going to have, to feel and to be human, it's going to have some kind of provenance ownership of something that you own. Your work that you do when you have these outputs and then people say like, this is something that means to me, that specific one, that's got to be a connection that you appreciate, when they like, this is something that speaks to me, even though it's a generative code that might look the same or have same sort of aspects, but there's something about that being an individual piece for somebody. So like, do you feel that when you're creating that you kind of connect to your collectors that way in some way?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is a really, unique experience. It's kind of funny because, in some ways, so this set of work is obviously like highly curated by me. I said I went from 40,000 down to 50. And how did I do that? I mean, I had to pick pieces that personally connected with me. Like all of them are ones that I love for some reason. And honestly, I love each of the 50 for a different reason. That was something I was really hoping to get out of this set. And what's interesting is that means really that there will be 50 collectors who respond to a different piece for a different reason. And it's always amazing to see those collectors identify a particular piece and resonate with a particular piece. Everybody comes from their own background. They have their own taste. They have their own kind of motivations, way that they evaluate artwork. It's something as simple as a different favorite color, and so it's amazing to see, like, out of all these 50, I don't expect everybody to resonate with all 50. So it's kind of cool to see somebody else is like, I'm like, yeah, you know why I liked that one too. Like that's awesome. Like not everybody's gonna want, the one that's like mostly yellow with just a little white stripe, but like you see why that one's special too. And so it is cool to like have that connection with the collector, and that's an amazing thing about. I think in person I really get to experience that even more than I do in the digital format. Of course, there's a certain amount of that that's happening digitally. People love to share their work and talk about why they love it, which is amazing. But yeah, as humans, I think we always connect the most when we do things together physically. So that's a great part of this.
So you went for Fidenzas, which is a certain amount of outputs.
1,000 or 999, yeah.
Then you went to QQL, where you let people do their outputs.
Yes.
To this, where you decided the outputs.
Yes. Is there a trend line happening there?
What's next? Like, where do you go from that? I mean, you sounds like you're like, here are my 3 projects. Here are 3 different ways I did it. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, as you point out, there's 3 very different curation models. Fidenza is like one algorithm, no curation, right? Or all curation happens just in the crafting of the algorithm, which in some ways means that the algorithm needs to be more narrowly defined. Like, I have to be really sure that it's not going to put out bad outputs, right? And so it can't be rolling the dice in quite such an extreme way. Next project is QQL, and this is one that's curated in a distributed way by the community and by collectors. And that one's like all over the place. It's a huge amount of range. There can be a lot of bad ones. There can be absolutely incredible ones. And I'm kind of trusting the community and the collectors to do a good job of curating and finding those gems. And honestly, they've done a really good job.
Has there, just before you get to your last point, has there any been time that someone posted a QQL that they minted, and you, in your own, like, quietly were like, that sucks shit, but you can't tweet that?
Well, I'll just say that there's at least like one person who was a troll and like clearly minted things for trollish reasons. Which, hey, if they want to spend their money that way, like, you know, and it's kind of interesting because that's an aspect that makes that body of work is a reflection of the community that developed it. It's half mine, it's half community. So really, it shows the taste and the values of the community, which I think is fascinating in its own way. So it's not even, to me, it's not even too much important whether I particularly love every single one. I love seeing the diversity of what people are interested in and what they're willing to spend their time and their money on.
That's a very political answer to say.
Yeah,
that
thank you. I appreciate that.
So you were finishing and said now the third thing is this curated sort of version you were doing.
Yeah, and I think that there's two advantages here. One is that it kind of allows me to have like a really singular vision in some ways. Like all 50 were really kind of coherently selected with the entire set in mind, and that they all kind of counterbalance each other and they all play a distinct role. So me being the singular curator has a lot of value in that. Yeah. It also, it kind of allowed me to write like an algorithm where I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted out of it at the beginning. I knew that I enjoyed the textures. I knew that I enjoyed the color palette. I knew that there was something there about the composition. But if you look at all 40,000 of those, there's actually a pretty staggering amount of range, and a lot of them are really complex, really busy. There's a lot happening. It was only through the curation process that I really settled on especially enjoying the more sort of minimal side of what the algorithm was producing. And I don't know that I would have ended up in the same place if I was trying to write one algorithm with, like Fidenza, where there was no curation element involved. Yeah. So I think it helped me to get to like a more unique place for me personally with the artwork in terms of the quality of it. So,
last question. Right. I think it was Dimitri who said that he doesn't believe the best generative artists have even started yet. Yeah. Because the way that coding works is that we might have incredible human beings who are much younger, who are just in high school now, and they're going to create some of the best generative work that's going to come.
100%.
Yeah. Can you give us a little thought on that? Because I think that's really about, if we're talking about why this is so important, it's like, it's not just important for now, it's what's going to come in the art world. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think every artist, you grow up looking at all the art of the artists that came before you, and you learn from them. You more than anything, they expand your worldview of what not only is possible, but what's sort of expected, right? Like they set a bar. They, for somebody right now, like a kid seeing this work, they think, okay, it's, writing an algorithm makes 1,000 images, no big deal. Like apparently multiple people can do that, so surely I can do that too. And so it's not going to be seen by them as this like special feat. And that's just kind of like the starting point that they're taking off from. So absolutely, in the same way that we saw this massive evolution of, say, painting, for example, or think about music, they're going to be able to take everything that artists like myself and Dimitri have done and just use that as like kind of ingredients and inspiration for taking it to the next level. And it'll come much more naturally to them. Like a lot of this stuff, is me and Dimitri, like kind of still figuring things out. Yeah. And they'll be figuring things out too in their own way, but they have such a much more rich vocabulary to draw from as a starting point. So yeah, absolutely. I think we'll get like crushed by the kids in no time.
And I think there's some really young artists now, like Luke Shannon and
for sure
Matt and Pon, and like all these incredible generative artists that are starting. Well, with that said, I think that they keep telling me that we're down to time. So okay. Tyler Hobbs, alive, creating amazing art. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank
on
you, Benny.
stage.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, y'all.